July 8, 2014. Estádio Mineirão, Belo Horizonte, Brazil. 58,000 Brazilian fans packed the Mineirão Stadium, wearing yellow jerseys, waving flags, holding banners with Neymar's face and messages of support. They'd come to watch their national team, the five-time World Cup champions, the soccer gods who'd given the world Pelé and Ronaldo, advance to the World Cup final for the first time in 12 years. Brazil would face Germany, a three-time World Cup champion and traditional powerhouse. But Brazil was at home, playing in front of their people, carrying the hopes of 200 million Brazilians. The pressure was suffocating, but manageable. They'd beaten Colombia in the quarterfinals. They could beat Germany. Then, over 18 minutes in the first half, the impossible happened. Germany scored 5 goals in 18 minutes, demolishing Brazil 5-0 before the match was even half over. Thomas Müller scored first in the 11th minute. Miroslav Klose scored in the 23rd minute, breaking the all-time World Cup scoring record. Toni Kroos scored twice in 69 seconds, the fastest brace in World Cup history. Sami Khedira scored in the 29th minute. 5 goals, 18 minutes. The Mineirão crowd fell silent, stunned, broken. Thousands of fans were crying, sobbing uncontrollably, watching their team disintegrate in the most humiliating fashion imaginable. Others covered their faces, unable to watch. The final score was 7-1, Germany adding 2 more goals in the second half, while Brazil managed a consolation goal from Oscar that meant nothing. It was Brazil's worst home defeat in history, equaling their worst defeat ever from 1920 when Uruguay beat them 6-0. It ended Brazil's 62-match unbeaten streak in competitive home matches dating to 1975. And it crushed a nation's dream so completely that Brazilians would coin a new term, Mineiraço, comparing it to the Maracanazo of 1950, when Brazil lost the World Cup final at home to Uruguay, the previous darkest day in Brazilian soccer history. This is the story of how Brazil, missing their injured star Neymar and suspended captain Thiago Silva, collapsed under the pressure of hosting the World Cup in front of their people, how Germany produced the most dominant offensive performance in World Cup semifinal history, how 58,000 fans went from hope to horror to heartbreak in 18 minutes, and why July 8, 2014 remains the most shocking result in World Cup history nearly 11 years later. The 2014 FIFA World Cup was awarded to Brazil in 2007, 7 years before the tournament would begin. It was Brazil's second time hosting, the first being 1950, when they'd lost the final to Uruguay in the Maracanazo. That loss had haunted Brazilian soccer for 64 years. Despite winning 5 World Cups since 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994, and 2002, Brazil had never fully recovered from the trauma of losing at home in front of 173,000 people at the Maracanã. The 2014 World Cup was a chance at redemption, an opportunity to win the tournament at home and finally exorcise the ghost of 1950. But hosting the World Cup came with enormous pressure. Brazil spent over $15 billion on stadiums, infrastructure, and preparations. The spending sparked protests across the country, with citizens angry that billions were going to stadiums while public services like healthcare and education remained underfunded. FIFA's demands for luxury accommodations and tax exemptions further angered Brazilians who saw the tournament as benefiting foreign interests more than locals. The protests created a tense atmosphere. The government deployed military forces to secure tournament sites. The opening ceremony in São Paulo was interrupted by tear gas from protests outside the stadium. Despite the social tensions, Brazil's national team was expected to win. They'd won the 2013 FIFA Confederations Cup on home soil, defeating Spain 3-0 in the final. Their squad featured Neymar Jr., the 22-year-old forward who just joined Barcelona and was considered the heir to Pelé and Ronaldo as Brazil's next great superstar. They had Thiago Silva, the Paris Saint-Germain defender who captained the team and organized the defense. They had Oscar, Hulk, Fernandinho, and veteran goalkeeper Julio César. The coach was Felipe Scolari, who'd led Brazil to World Cup victory in 2002, nicknamed Philipp Lahm, Big Phil, by fans. Brazil's path to the semifinals had been challenging but successful. They opened with a 3-1 win over Croatia, though the match was controversial with questionable refereeing favoring Brazil. They beat Cameroon 4-1 and Mexico 0-0 in group play, advancing to the knockout rounds as Group A winners. In the round of 16, they faced Chile in a match that went to penalty kicks after a 1-1 draw, with Brazil winning the shootout. Then came the quarterfinal against Colombia on July 4th. The Colombia match changed everything. Brazil won 2-1 behind goals from Thiago Silva and David Luiz, but the victory came at a devastating cost. Neymar, who'd carried Brazil's attack throughout the tournament with 4 goals, was kneed in the back by Colombian defender Juan Zúñiga late in the match. Neymar crumpled to the ground in agony. He was carried off on a stretcher, tears streaming down his face. Medical exams after the match revealed a fractured vertebrae. Neymar's World Cup was over. Brazil would have to play the semifinals without their best attacker and the young star who'd become the symbol of their hopes. Worse, Thiago Silva had received a yellow card against Colombia, his second of the tournament. FIFA's rules automatically suspended players who accumulated 2 yellow cards. Silva would miss the semifinal. Brazil would face Germany without their best attacker and their defensive leader. The losses were catastrophic, but Scolari and the team insisted they'd overcome the absences through collective spirit and determination. Germany had dominated their path to the semifinals. They'd won Group G with victories over Portugal, Ghana, and a 1-0 win over the United States. In the round of 16, they crushed Algeria 2-1 in extra time. In the quarterfinals, they defeated France 1-0 behind a goal from Mats Hummels. Germany looked clinical, efficient, dangerous. Their coach was Joachim Löw, who'd taken over in 2006 and transformed German soccer from rigid and mechanical to creative and attacking. Their squad featured Bayern Munich stars like goalkeeper Neuer, midfielder Bastian Schweinsteiger, winger Thomas Müller, and forward Mario Götze. They had Arsenal midfielder Mesut Özil, Real Madrid midfielder Toni Kroos, and veteran striker Miroslav Klose, who'd scored 15 World Cup goals in his career, one behind Ronaldo's all-time record of 16. The build-up to the match was emotional in Brazil. Neymar recorded a video from his hospital bed, urging his teammates to win for him. Captain Thiago Silva, suspended and forced to watch from the stands, gave emotional interviews about his heartbreak at missing the match. Brazilian media focused heavily on Neymar's absence, treating it like a national tragedy. The team held up Neymar's jersey during the national anthem before the match.
David Luiz, the Paris Saint-Germain defender known for his flowing hair and emotional personality, was named captain in Silva's absence. In Germany, the preparation was different. Löw focused his players on tactics, not emotions. Germany had faced Brazil in the 2002 World Cup final, losing 2-0 in Yokohama. Many players remembered that loss. This was an opportunity for revenge, but Löw warned against overconfidence. Brazil, even without Neymar, was still Brazil. They were at home. The crowd would be a factor. Germany would need to be perfect. July 8, 2014, 5 p.m. local time. Kickoff at the Mineirão. The stadium was a sea of yellow and green. Brazilian flags waved everywhere. The crowd sang the national anthem with such passion that players were crying during the anthem. The emotion was overwhelming. This was about more than soccer. It was about national pride, about redemption for 1950, about honoring Neymar's sacrifice. When the referee blew the whistle to start the match, the roar from 58,000 Brazilians was deafening. Brazil came out aggressively, pressing high, attacking Germany's defense. In the first minute, Marcelo burst into Germany's penalty area, only to be stopped by a perfect sliding tackle from Philipp Lahm. The crowd erupted, believing Brazil would dominate. For 10 minutes, Brazil controlled possession, created chances, looked like the team that would win. Then everything collapsed. In the 11th minute, Germany earned a corner kick. Toni Kroos curled the ball into the penalty area. Thomas Müller, unmarked at the far post, met it with a simple tap-in. 1-0, Germany. The Mineirão went silent. The Brazilian players looked stunned. Müller ran to celebrate while Brazil's defenders argued about who should have marked him. The goal was soft, preventable. Exactly the kind of defensive mistake Brazil couldn't afford. Brazil tried to respond immediately, attacking with desperation, but Germany's counterattacks were surgical. In the 23rd minute, Mesut Özil broke through Brazil's defense and shot. Goalkeeper Julio César saved the initial attempt, but the rebound fell to Miroslav Klose. The 36-year-old striker, playing in his 4th World Cup, tapped the ball into an empty net. 2-0 Germany. Klose had broken Ronaldo's all-time World Cup scoring record with his 16th World Cup goal. The Brazilian legend was in the stadium as a television commentator, watching a German break his record against Brazil on Brazilian soil. 2 goals in 12 minutes. The Mineirão crowd was nervous but still hopeful. 2-goal deficits could be overcome. Brazil had fought back before. They just needed to settle down, reorganize, stop the bleeding. Instead, the bleeding became a hemorrhage. In the 24th minute, barely 60 seconds after Klose's goal, Germany attacked again. Philipp Lahm crossed from the right wing. The ball sailed across Brazil's penalty area. No Brazilian defender closed down Toni Kroos, who was standing completely unmarked 18 yards from goal. Kroos controlled the ball with his left foot and smashed it past Julio César. 3-0 Germany. The stadium fell silent. Fans were covering their faces, unable to watch. On the field, Brazilian players were shell-shocked, standing still, not communicating, looking like they'd forgotten how to play soccer. In the 26th minute, from Germany's goal kick, Brazilian midfielder Fernandinho tried to control the ball in midfield. Sami Khedira robbed him easily, played a simple pass to Toni Kroos, who had acres of space in front of Brazil's goal. Kroos tapped the ball into the net. 4-0 Germany. 69 seconds separated Kroos's 2 goals, the fastest brace in World Cup history. The Mineirão was a graveyard. Thousands of fans were crying openly. Others were leaving, unable to watch anymore. This wasn't a soccer match. It was a massacre. In the 29th minute, Mesut Özil received the ball on the left wing, dribbled past Maicon like the Brazilian defender wasn't there, and crossed to Sami Khedira, who scored easily. 5-0 Germany. 18 minutes had passed since Müller's opening goal. Germany had scored 5 times. Brazil, the 5-time World Cup champions, the team playing at home, had stopped defending, stopped fighting, stopped existing as a cohesive unit. Players were arguing with each other. David Luiz, the captain, was screaming at teammates. Marcelo was walking around looking lost. Hulk and Oscar were invisible. The team had mentally collapsed. German television cameras captured German fans in the crowd looking uncomfortable, almost embarrassed by what was happening. This wasn't a competitive match, this was humiliation. On the German bench, Joachim Löw looked concerned rather than celebratory, worried that his team's dominance was verging on disrespectful. After Khedira's goal in the 29th minute, Löw instructed his players to ease off, to stop attacking so aggressively, to show some mercy. The instruction came too late to save Brazil from historic humiliation, but it prevented an even worse scoreline in the second half. At halftime, the score was 5-0. Brazilian fans sat in stunned silence. Some were still crying. Others were staring blankly at the field. In the stands, celebrities and dignitaries looked shell-shocked. In the locker room, Scolari tried to rally his players, but what could he say? The match was over. Brazil's World Cup dream was dead. The only question was how much worse the humiliation would get. The second half was a formality. Germany, following Löw's instructions, played conservatively, maintaining possession, not pressing aggressively. Brazil looked broken, going through the motions, players already thinking about going home. In the 69th minute, substitute André Schürrle scored to make it 6-0. 10 minutes later, Schürrle scored again. 7-0 Germany. The Mineirão crowd, in a gesture that shocked many observers, began applauding Germany's passes. They'd given up on Brazil and started appreciating Germany's excellence, a coping mechanism for unbearable pain. In the 90th minute, Brazil finally scored. Oscar received a pass on the edge of Germany's penalty area and shot past Manuel Neuer. 7-1. It was Brazil's first goal of the match, and meaningless. The crowd gave a small cheer, more out of relief than joy. At least Brazil had avoided a shutout. At least the scoreline wasn't 7-0 or 8-0. These were the desperate consolations of a nation in trauma. The final whistle blew. Germany had won 7-1, advancing to the World Cup final. On the field, German players celebrated but with restraint, aware of the devastation around them. Philipp Lahm and Per Mertesacker consoled Brazilian players. Löw hugged Scolari, who looked 10 years older than he had 2 hours earlier. Brazilian players collapsed on the field. Some were crying, others were sitting with their heads in their hands. David Luiz, who'd been named
man of the match, in a cruel joke by FIFA's technical committee, sobbed in post-match interviews. "I wanted to see my people happy," David Luiz told reporters, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, everyone. I just wanted to see my people smile. I'm sorry." His apology became a symbol of Brazil's collective heartbreak. This wasn't just a soccer match. It was a national catastrophe. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Brazilian media called it the worst day in the country's sporting history, worse even than the Maracanazo of 1950. At least in 1950, Brazil had lost 2-1 in the final. This was 7-1 in the semifinals. This was total destruction. Social media exploded with memes mocking Brazil. International media compared it to historic sporting disasters. Sports Illustrated called it the mauling in Belo Horizonte. The Washington Post wrote that Brazil would need to coin a new idiom to describe this tragedy. Scolari took full responsibility. "The catastrophic result is mine," he told reporters. "I was in charge. I'm sorry we couldn't get to the final." But the criticism extended beyond Scolari. The Brazilian Football Confederation was blamed for creating too much pressure by focusing on Neymar's absence. The players were criticized for mental weakness. The fans were blamed for creating unbearable expectations. Everyone had failed. Everyone was guilty. Germany, meanwhile, advanced to the World Cup final on July 13th, where they faced Argentina at the Maracanã in Rio de Janeiro. In extra time, substitute Mario Götze scored the winning goal. Germany won 1-0, claiming their 4th World Cup title and first since 1990, when Germany was still divided into East and West. The victory vindicated Löw's tactical approach and cemented Germany's status as one of the great World Cup teams. For Brazil, the pain continued. 3 days after the Germany defeat, they faced Netherlands in the third-place match in Brasilia. Brazil lost 3-0, completing a week of humiliation with another multi-goal defeat. They finished 4th in a World Cup they'd hosted, failing to reach the final for the first time since 1990. Scolari resigned immediately after the Netherlands match. Several players, including David Luiz and Hoke, were never called up to the national team again. The statistical breakdown of the Germany match revealed the extent of Brazil's collapse. Germany had 13 shots, 8 on target, 7 goals, an absurd 53.8% conversion rate. Brazil had 18 shots but only 3 on target, scoring just once. Germany completed 492 passes to Brazil's 395. Germany's possession was 52% to Brazil's 48%, nearly even, which made the scoreline even more shocking. This wasn't domination in possession. This was clinical finishing combined with catastrophic defending. Individual Brazilian players were destroyed by the result. Goalkeeper Julio Cesar, who'd been brilliant throughout the tournament, was blamed for several goals, though his defenders had abandoned him. Defender Dante, who replaced the suspended Thiago Silva, was vilified for his poor positioning. Midfielder Fernandinho, whose turnover led to Germany's 4th goal, faced death threats on social media. The scapegoating was cruel but predictable. Someone had to be blamed. The German players in interviews after the match expressed sympathy for Brazil. "I felt very uneasy during the match," Philipp Lahm said. "Not at all euphoric. They made mistakes that don't usually happen at this level." Toni Kroos noted that Brazil couldn't show their best performance due to all the outside pressure. Even in victory, Germany recognized that they'd witnessed something unusual. Not just their excellence, but Brazil's complete psychological breakdown under pressure. The term Mineiraço entered Brazilian vocabulary immediately, comparing the defeat to the Maracanazo of 1950. But some argued the Mineiraço was worse. In 1950, Brazil had lost 2-1 in the final after leading 1-0, a heartbreaking but respectable defeat. In 2014, Brazil had been destroyed 7-1 in the semifinals, humiliated in front of the world. The Maracanã had been Brazil's Jerusalem, the sacred site of their greatest tragedy. Now the Mineirão in Belo Horizonte became another shrine of suffering. 2 years later, in the 2016 Olympics held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil's under-23 team faced Germany's under-23 team in the gold medal match at the Maracanã. The match was viewed by many Brazilians as a chance for redemption, an opportunity to partially erase the memory of 2014. The match ended 1-1 after extra time. Brazil won 5-4 on penalty kicks, with Neymar, recovered from his back injury, scoring the decisive penalty. Brazil won their first Olympic football gold medal. The victory helped heal some wounds, though it couldn't erase the Mineirazo. At senior level, Brazil and Germany didn't meet again in a major tournament after 2014. They played a friendly in Berlin in March 2018, with Brazil winning 1-0 on a goal from Gabriel Jesus. The friendly meant nothing competitively, but allowed Brazilian fans to claim a small measure of revenge. Still, the 7-1 defeat remained the defining moment, the scoreline that would follow Brazil's 2014 generation forever. For Germany, the 7-1 victory was a stepping stone to World Cup glory, but it was also controversial within German soccer. Some German officials and players later expressed discomfort with the margin of victory, feeling that running up the score on a psychologically broken opponent was unsporting. Bastian Schweinsteiger said years later that he'd felt sorry for Brazil, that watching them collapse had been painful to witness. The sentiment reflected German soccer culture, which valued efficiency and professionalism but not humiliation of opponents. The broader impact on Brazilian soccer was profound. The defeat exposed systemic problems in Brazilian player development, tactical preparation, and mental conditioning. Brazil had relied too heavily on individual brilliance, primarily Neymar, rather than developing a cohesive tactical system. When Neymar was injured, the team had no plan B. The pressure of hosting the World Cup, rather than motivating players, had paralyzed them. These lessons led to reforms in Brazilian soccer, though progress was slow. Luiz Felipe Scolari never coached a major team again after 2014. He took jobs in Brazil and China, but retired in 2021 at age 72. He'd won the World Cup in 2002, led Portugal to the Euro 2004 final, and achieved success at club level. But the 7-1 defeat defined his end of career. In interviews, Scolari insisted he'd done his best with the circumstances he was given, that losing Neymar and Thiago Silva had made the task impossible. Critics argued he should have better prepared his team psychologically for the enormous pressure. David Luiz, the emotional defender who captained Brazil in that match, struggled with the aftermath. He'd scored a brilliant free-kick goal against Colombia in the quarterfinals, one of
the tournament's great moments. But the 7-1 became his legacy from the 2014 World Cup. He continued playing for Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea, and Arsenal, winning major trophies, but the Mineirazo followed him. Brazilian fans were divided. Some sympathized with his tears and obvious devastation. Others blamed him for defensive failures. The 58,000 fans in the Mineirão on July 8, 2014, witnessed the most shocking result in World Cup history. The match had begun with hope, expectation, belief that Brazil would advance to the final. Within 18 minutes, hope became horror. The crowd's evolution from loud support to stunned silence to applauding Germany's passes captured the psychological journey of an entire nation. They'd come to celebrate. They left traumatized. Sports psychologists have studied the Mineirazo extensively, analyzing how a team can collapse so completely under pressure. The prevailing theory is that Brazil experienced a cascade failure. One goal led to panic, panic led to mistakes, mistakes led to more goals, and the psychological weight became unbearable. Players stopped trusting each other. They stopped trusting themselves. They stopped following tactical instructions. The team ceased to function as a unit and became 11 individuals experiencing simultaneous mental breakdowns. The comparison to the 1950 Maracanazo is inevitable but imperfect. Both were World Cup defeats at home. Both traumatized Brazil. But the Maracanazo was a close match, decided by one goal, where Brazil played well but lost. The Mineirazo was a humiliation, where Brazil stopped competing. If 1950 was a tragedy, 2014 was a catastrophe. If 1950 was heartbreak, 2014 was humiliation. The long-term assessment of the 7-1 remains controversial. Some argue Brazil was doomed by Neymar's injury and Silva's suspension, that any team would have struggled without their best player and defensive leader.
Others insist Brazil's collapse revealed deeper problems: mental fragility, tactical inflexibility, over-reliance on individual talent. The truth likely includes both explanations. Brazil was weakened by absences, but shouldn't have collapsed so completely. For neutral observers, the match was simultaneously fascinating and uncomfortable. Watching a great team self-destruct was historic, but sad. Germany's attacking excellence was remarkable. 5 goals in 18 minutes may never be matched in a World Cup semifinal. But the ease of those goals, the lack of competition, made the achievement feel hollow. This wasn't Germany at their absolute best. This was Brazil at their absolute worst, with Germany capitalizing on mistakes. The phrase 7-1 became shorthand for catastrophic failure in Brazilian culture. Politicians accused of corruption were compared to the 7-1. Business failures were described as a 7-1 situation. The scoreline transcended soccer, becoming a cultural marker for the worst possible outcome. A decade later, the wound remains open. Brazilian fans can discuss the Maracanazo with some emotional distance. It was 1950, in black and white footage, before most living Brazilians were born. The Mineirazo happened in HD television, shared instantly on social media, preserved forever in the collective memory of 200 million people. When the final whistle blew on July 8, 2014, at the Estádio Mineirão, Brazil's World Cup dream didn't just end. It exploded in the most humiliating fashion imaginable. A 7-1 defeat that equaled their worst-ever result, broke their 62-match unbeaten streak, and created a new term, Mineirazo, to describe the catastrophe. Germany had scored 5 goals in 18 minutes against the 5-time World Cup champions playing at home. The impossible had happened, and 58,000 Brazilians, along with 200 million watching at home, witnessed their team's complete psychological and tactical collapse, proving that sometimes the pressure of expectations, combined with cruel circumstance, can break even the greatest soccer nations in the world.